know a lot of times there is like that, especially I think for people that are social workers or who are aspiring social workers who are studying to become social workers, there is a need for community, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with difficult situations and maybe even seeing things that you've never seen before. What are some of the things that can stop you from seeking community care, or what have been some of the obstacles that you needed to work around in order to
Mm-hmm.
kind of see a community around yourself or to build a community around yourself?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So one of them is something that I've already mentioned before. So it's that, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times throughout, which is great. Like the myth of doing it alone. So I think we've talked about that. So I won't explain it too much unless it's needed. But I think the other thing is it's quite a personal one, but it's actually being able and opening yourself up to receive support. That can be really, really scary for people who are used to doing things alone. But I think there's also, and maybe it's just my own experience, but I think there is this notion, as social workers, or people who studied social work, it's like we need to be able to do all these things and cope with all the things, and we support others, but we don't need support. And so I think really troubling that myth, and saying, like, the people who support others also need support, even if it's not necessarily normalized. So that's definitely something. So it's definitely like an internal thing to work through, to actually need support, recognize it, and then ask for it. And so I would say that's definitely been an obstacle that I have had to work through myself. Um, and then I also think there is something to be said about people's positionality, and like, for me, as being like along like racial and gendered lines, there's also something, um I think I think it's like a societal pressure because of the power structures that we have, that like racialized people and more femme presenting people and women have to be strong and take care of everyone, but not necessarily be taken care of. And so I think I had to unlearn that on a cultural level, and also on a professional level, and also on a personal level, and yeah. And so I think those are some of the things that have stopped me. Mhm.
Do you have any maybe advice, or can you share a little bit about um, what you did to kind of work around those or to overcome those mental blocks or beliefs?
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of them, and I don't know if we talk about it enough in the field, is actually accessing support for myself, whether that is actually going to therapy and talking about the fact that it is hard for me to access support. So that's, I would say, one thing that can actually be really valuable, because I do think we talk a lot about providing other people with mental health support, but what does that look like for yourself? And I think it's so, so important to ask those questions. But I think the second thing, is having people that I trust, um, that I know, um, that I either know for a while, or just people that I have a sense of trust and community with, and being able to start really small and ask them for something. And it's like a really low stakes thing. Like, hey, could you, I'm doing a performance tomorrow. Would you like to come? Like, just something like, I would like to feel supported by a friend, and asking those things, or being like, hey, um I have a deadline coming up for something and I'm really nervous. Do you think you would like to read over what I've written? um and starting with things where I knew that I would be disappointed if it didn't happen, but it was like a lower stakes thing. And then relying, knowing as time went on, I built that with people. And then I was able to ask for maybe bigger things or things that felt like I need to do this by myself, but being able to reach out and say, hey, I'm in a situation where I feel vulnerable, but I actually do need help. And then I think also there's something to be said about vulnerability because it requires me admitting that I need the help and um reconciling that within myself and actually opening myself up to it, whether that's the person does the thing or I'm disappointed, but opening myself up. And that takes risk and it can be very scary when you're not used to it. So I think just being able to sit with yourself and say, like, okay, I know both of the outcomes and I'm okay with it. And I'm building something here and it's important. And so it's almost like exercising a muscle, you know? Yeah.
I like that idea of starting with small steps, but then also recognizing that when you take the big step, it's still going to be hard.
Yeah, absolutely.